They smiled at my brother's fiancée and said, "Now this is our real daughter." I didn't speak. I just stood there, half in the photo, half forgotten. Not even my mom looked at me. 2 weeks later, we gathered again, this time not for a party, but for the will. The room was silent, tense. Then my name was read out loud. Not hers, not theirs. Mine, the deed, the company, the legacy. No one smiled after that. They didn't have to say a word. Neither did I. The silence said enough. My name is Delaney Rhodes, and in this family I was always something temporary. Not the golden child, not the heir, not the daughter they showed off. Just the quiet one, the afterthought. When I was 12, my parents died in a car crash. It happened on a Tuesday. It rained that morning. I remember the officer's voice, low, careful, like he was scared I might fall apart. I didn't. I packed a bag. I sat on the porch until a black sedan pulled up. Inside was my grandfather, Gerald Rhodes. He didn't hug me. He didn't ask if I was okay. He handed me a key to the guest room and said, "Be useful." That was my welcome into the Rhodes estate. The house was huge, silent, cold. You could hear the staff's footsteps echo through the marble. The chandeliers sparkled like ice. The walls were lined with paintings of dead men who shared my last name but not my story. Richard, my uncle, made it clear I didn't belong. He'd invite guests over and say things like, "Oh, that's Delaney, Gerald's project," like I was some kind of community service. His daughter Mila never called me cousin, just her or you or nothing at all. She wore uniforms with her name stitched in gold thread. She once laughed when I spilled juice on the tablecloth and said, "Even the help knows better." I kept my head down. I studied hard. I got perfect grades. While Mila flew to France for summer programs, I worked at a bookstore. While Richard bought her a car at 16, I patched mine together from scraps. No one asked if I needed anything. No one cared. And yet I still showed up. At family birthdays, graduations, fundraisers. I brought homemade gifts, offered to help with the dishes. Once I even covered a 5-figure accounting mistake Richard made with his startup. He never said thank you. I never expected him to. Even Grandpa never once said the words, "I'm proud of you." He nodded sometimes. Once he handed me a book on business law and said, "You'll need this someday." I thought it was a joke. Looking back, maybe it wasn't. Still, I never believed I was one of them. At family dinners, I sat on the edge of the table. In photos, I was the one cropped out. And when Mila got engaged, the announcement went viral. Perfect dress, perfect ring, and one line under the photo, "So happy to welcome our new daughter into the Rhodes family." My mom had commented that, my mom. Not a word about me, not even a text, so I did what I'd always done, smiled, stayed silent, until the will reading. 2 weeks after the funeral, I got the email from Mr. Langford, the family's longtime lawyer. It was formal, sterile, like always. "You are requested to attend the reading of Mr. Gerald Rhodes's final testament, Monday, 10 a.m., Rhodes Estate." I stared at the screen for a long time. I almost didn't go. What was the point? But something in me needed to hear it. Maybe closure. Maybe one final confirmation that I had never mattered. Either way I went. I wore a plain black dress, the same one I wore to the funeral. No pearls, no designer handbag, just me. The house looked exactly as it always did, polished, cold, indifferent. The staff didn't greet me. They never did. I walked into the main parlor where the long oak table stood, stretching like a spine through the room. The portraits on the walls watched from above. Every chair was filled except one. No one looked up when I sat. Richard was at the head, of course. His watch gleamed under the morning sun. Mila scrolled through her phone legs, crossed sunglasses still on indoors. My parents weren't there. They didn't bother. Mr. Langford adjusted his glasses and opened the thick folder in front of him. He cleared his throat. The room hushed. To Mr. Richard Rhodes, he began, "I leave full ownership of the Rhodes Properties portfolio, the Vineyard Estate, and executive voting shares." Richard nodded like he was confirming a business transaction. No emotion, no surprise. To Ms. Mila Rhodes, Mr. Langford continued, "I leave the family jewelry collection, the Geneva Trust, and custodianship of the Aspen Vault." Mila finally looked up. smirked, then returned to her phone. I sat still, didn't blink, didn't fidget. I already knew what was coming. A pat on the head, maybe a scholarship fund I no longer needed. But Mr. Langford paused. Just a second, just long enough for something to shift in the air. There is one final item, he said, turning the page. A personal message. It is not part of the written will. It was recorded separately at Mr. Rhodes's request. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a silver flash drive. It is addressed to Delaney Rhodes and Delaney alone. Gerald Rhodes specified it may be played publicly only with her consent. The room went dead silent. What kind of message? Richard asked, his tone clipped. A video, Langford replied. Mila scoffed. Seriously, that's what she gets. Richard leaned back, arms crossed. He gave her a roof. That should have been enough. I didn't respond. I stared at the flash drive and nodded once. Mr. Langford plugged it into the laptop. The screen flickered, and there he was, my grandfather. His face was pale thinner than I remembered, but his eyes, those sharp, assessing eyes, were alive. He looked straight into the camera. Delaney, he said. If you're seeing this, then I've gone. But there are things I never said, things I should have said a long time ago. The room stopped breathing. Even Mila took off her sunglasses. I gripped the sides of my chair. My grandfather continued. You were never just a guest in this house. You were my second chance, and I made sure the world would finally know that. I never told you why I took you in. Grandpa continued, his voice steady. I made it seem like duty, like obligation. But it was more than that. The room had gone completely still. You see, he said your father James was my son. I froze. Richard's head snapped toward the screen. Mila blinked. He was born out of wedlock. The 1960s were different. I was scared. Foolish. I hid the truth to protect the Rhodes name. I never claimed him, never raised him. I thought I could bury that part of my life. But when he died, and I found out you had nowhere to go, I saw my mistake staring back at me. I gripped the arms of my chair so hard my knuckles ached. You reminded me of him, Grandpa said. Same eyes, same silence when you're hurt. I couldn't undo what I did to your father, but I could be there for you. Richard shifted in his seat. Mila's fingers twitched against her phone screen, unsure whether to record or run. I wasn't affectionate. I didn't know how. But I saw you, Delaney. I saw everything. How you helped in silence. How you worked part-time instead of asking for allowance. How you paid part of the accountant's silence fee when Richard siphoned funds from the Rhodes development account. Gasps rippled across the room. Richard's face drained of color. You thought no one knew, Grandpa continued. But I did. I just didn't say anything. Until now. My heart pounded in my chest. You lived in this house like a ghost. They all treated you like you were temporary, but you were the only one who never lied to me. You never played the game. He paused, and so I played mine. Mr. Langford stepped forward and pressed pause. Before we continue, he said, his voice composed but firmer than before. There's a legal matter that must be addressed. He pulled out a thin black folder from his briefcase and opened it. Several years ago, Mr. Gerald Rhodes filed for legal adoption of Delaney Rhodes. The process was completed and notarized. Under the law, she is his daughter, his only legal child. The table shook slightly as Richard shoved his chair back. This is a joke, he hissed. He was senile. This can't be binding. It is, Mr. Langford replied calmly. It was witnessed and signed in my office. All documents are valid. Mila looked stunned. Her smirk had vanished. She looked at me like she was seeing a stranger. Richard stood. You knew about this, he barked at me. I didn't, I said quietly. I had no idea. Mr. Langford cleared his throat. And as Mr. Rhodes's legal child and direct heir, Delaney is entitled to the full controlling interest of Rhodes Enterprises. Effective immediately, she assumes all corporate voting rights, executive authority, and ownership of the main residence. My breath caught in my chest. He continued, this transition has already been communicated to the board. It is irreversible. Richard stared at me like I had pulled the floor out from under him. His empire, his title, his reputation shifted in a single sentence. I turned back to the screen. Mr. Langford resumed the video. Grandpa leaned in slightly, his voice softer now. "I know they'll be angry," he said. "Let them. They've had my attention their whole lives. But you, Delaney, you earned my respect." Mila swallowed hard, her confidence cracking. "You don't need their approval anymore," Grandpa said. "You never did." He leaned back. "Take what's yours. You were never a burden. You were my redemption." The screen went black. No one spoke. Mr. Langford folded his hands over the laptop. "That concludes Mr. Rhodes's final statement." Richard muttered something under his breath. Then louder, "We'll contest this. You may try." Mr. Langford replied, "But I suggest reading the revised bylaws your father signed last year. They named Delaney as successor CEO. The transition has already begun." Mila looked between him and me. Her voice was small. "Is this real?" I didn't answer. I stood slowly. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from release. Richard was staring at the table like it betrayed him. Mila looked at me like I had betrayed her. But I hadn't schemed. I hadn't planned this. I simply showed up, and they never saw me coming. I looked across the table one last time and said, "You always told me I didn't belong. Now you'll have to live with the fact that I do." Then I walked out. Not because I had to prove anything, but because for the first time in my life I didn't owe anyone an explanation. I didn't look back as I left the Rhodes estate. The wind outside was cool, almost sharp, but it felt like it cleared something in me. I sat behind the wheel of my car and closed my eyes, not from exhaustion, but from the weight of being finally seen. For so many years I had walked through that house like a ghost. Now I was the one with keys, not just to the front door, but to the company, the legacy, the name. But strangely, it wasn't power that hit me first. It was quiet. Peaceful, liberating quiet. The next few weeks moved quickly. Mr. Langford was efficient professional. He coordinated with the board's scheduled transition meetings and handled every angry email from Richard's lawyer without blinking. He never once treated me like I didn't belong. Richard didn't attend the board meeting. He sent a representative, a man in a navy suit, who dropped a file of formal objections on the table and left 5 minutes later. None of the objections held. My grandfather had been meticulous. Mila didn't reach out until the second week. She left a voicemail. It started with an oddly sweet tone. "Hey, Delaney, I've been thinking," and ended with something bitter and passive-aggressive about family politics and public embarrassment. I didn't return the call. I moved out of my attic apartment a few days later, but not into the mansion. I chose a modest, modern apartment closer to the company. No chandeliers, no oil paintings. Just clean, light silence and space that was mine. Fully mine. The first time I walked into Rhodes Enterprises as its majority shareholder, the receptionist blinked twice. She smiled politely and said, "Can I help you?" I gave her my name. Her eyes widened. She stood and buzzed me in. Every hallway was familiar. I used to intern there during summers. But now people didn't look through me. They looked at me. Curious, hesitant, calculating. I nodded when they greeted me. Not cold. Not rude. Just calm. Present. I wasn't there to impress anyone. I was there to lead. Still at night, questions stirred in my chest. Why hadn't Grandpa said all this sooner? Why had he let me go on thinking I was unwanted for so long I didn't have answers? Maybe I never would, but I was learning to live with that. Not everything needed closure to be over. Some things end quietly, just by being seen in the right light. A month after the will reading, I went to visit his grave. I didn't bring flowers. I brought a letter. It wasn't full of gratitude or anger. It was just honest. I told him I wished he had spoken up sooner, that it would have changed things, but I also told him I understood. He grew up in a time where silence was survival, where emotions were weakness. Still, I thanked him for finally saying the truth, for finally choosing me, not as a responsibility, but as a daughter. I left the letter tucked under a smooth stone. The wind picked up gently as I turned to go. That was the last time I stood at that grave, not because I didn't care, but because I had already carried his words with me. They were mine now, and I was no longer a question mark in this family. I was a full sentence, a period. No more waiting for someone to offer me a seat. No more wondering if I was wanted. I had stepped out of the margins, and I had rewritten the center. I used to think silence kept me safe. That if I just stayed quiet, stayed small, maybe they'd let me stay. But sometimes it's the silence that speaks loudest, especially when truth finally fills the room. Have you ever been treated like you didn't matter, only to realize you were the only one who truly did? I hope my story reminds someone out there you don't have to shout to be powerful. You don't have to be chosen to have worth. Sometimes being overlooked is just the beginning. What would you do if your silence finally spoke for you?